What you're about to hear are 6 terrifying Bigfoot encounters shared by real people, and some of these encounters are unlike anything you've ever heard. From a woman who hears a mysterious voice telling her not to look at a Bigfoot creature, to a firefighter that witnesses a Bigfoot shapeshift right in front of him. We're going to get into all that tonight, but before I do, I just want to say thanks for being here with me. If you've got an encounter you've been sitting on, I would love to hear about it. You can email me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right into these stories.
Encounter number 1.
It was in June of 2021. I had went out to get in the pool, and I was floating around, and then I heard this weird whistle come from the power line area, and it was just a real sharp, shrill whistle. And then a little bit later, I heard it again, but it was in the woods over on our property. And I was laying there, and I was looking down, and it's like there was a cedar tree, like a cedar tree on each side, and a little lane in the middle, and it opens up into a small field. Well, then I seen something reddish brown. It looked like, part of a head and a shoulder sticking out of the trees, and I thought, what is that? And I laid down, watched it, and I thought, well, maybe it's like a dead, a dead branch or something. And so I laid there and watched it. I never seen it move. And I thought, well, I'm going to float over and get a drink of water and then float back and see if it's still there, because it looked odd. It didn't. So that's what I did. I floated over. And then when I floated over, some of the branches from that cedar tree kind of blocked that area. And then when I floated back, it was gone. And I thought, what in the world? You know, and and I knew it wasn't a deer because it was too far up in the air. And so that night, Paul and I, we was sitting out front, and we heard a knock come from kind of back in that area. And then Wednesday night, we was sitting back out front, and we heard another knock coming from that area. And then on the other side of the house, we heard what sounded like a really deep, rough sneeze. And he got up and he walked to the other side of the house, because this was not a deer. There was no way this was a deer. And we was like, what in the world, But it was too dark, you couldn't see anything. But then the next day, that was a Thursday, I was going to go out and I was going to clean the pool. We were getting ready to leave to go on vacation. So I was really needing to get out there and get it clean. And I walked outside, I walked past my car, and then to my left is like a little bit of yard and then the driveway and then woods. But from those woods, I heard a grunt. And I knew it sounded in a way kind of like a buck grunting, but it was way too deep, way too deep. And so I was looking, I didn't see anything. So I walked on down. You have to go down some concrete steps that we built to get down into the yard to where the pool is. So I walked on over and I set my stuff. I didn't have a deck at the time, and he had built me this little tray to hang on the side of the pool. And, that's what I put my stuff on. I always carry protection out there with me. So I laid everything on that. I got in the pool, and I heard the grunt again from the same area. And I was looking, and I didn't see anything. So I started cleaning. And, as I was cleaning, I remember it sounded like a metallic sound, like metal hitting metal. And it came from back in that little field area. And he has a lot of metal pipes back there. And it almost sounded like something picking up a pipe and hitting it with the other pipe. That's what it sounded like. What in the world? And then I heard I don't know if it was a tree limb that broke and was crashing, or a small tree fell. I don't know. It was just a loud crash. And so by this time, I was feeling very uneasy. And so before I get to this last part, I'm going to try not to cough, but I believe 100% in guardian angels. I have heard them speak to me before, like a warning. It's a female, and she has saved my life or my kids. You know, um, and so as I was making my way around the pool, it's been the last time I was making my way around, and I just happened to look up, and Paul parks his truck. We have a little carport, and the top kind of comes down and covers the sides a little bit. But when I looked up, I was looking in between the carport and the tree, and about 40 yards away, 20 being yard and driveway, and then probably another 20 into the woods. There was one it was a reddish brown one standing there watching me. Um, and when I looked up at it, I looked at it for maybe about 5 seconds. Uh, and that's when she said, "Don't look at it." So I just turned right back to the water like I didn't even see it. And my mind was just racing because I knew I had to get out of that pool. And to walk towards the ladder, I would keep kind of walking in the direction of it. And I took a couple of steps forward. But the carport, the top, like I said, kind of come down. And there was some stuff stacked there on top of the lawnmower. And I couldn't see it. Um, I was trying to look because I didn't know if it was walking towards me. Um, so I stopped. I was trying to lean back. I was kind of, looking. I couldn't. I didn't know where it was at. And I remember I turned and I remember looking at my ladder, and that was the last thing I remember until I was actually out of the pool, and I was standing on the concrete steps, and I remember I was standing there looking around, looking for it, and everything was like foggy, like it was like I was in a fog. And I just remember scanning, looking for it, and then I turned and ran up the steps and came into the house. And uh, I don't know how much time I lost. Um, I don't know what happened during that time, but I'll describe what it looked like. It was a reddish brown. It was probably about 8 foot tall, um, about 4 foot wide at the shoulders, uh, and the way it was standing, uh, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like its arms were bowed, um, and its hair. It looked like it had taken its hair and pulled it over its face. I couldn't see the face. I could see the pec muscles in the chest. I could see the waist. I could see the thighs. I could see the right side really good. The sun was hitting that side, and I could see the thigh muscle. I could see uh, part of the calf muscle really good on the right side. I could see the left side, but the right side was really lit up. And I just remember the way it was standing. It had about 6 inch long hair hanging off of that arm, and the hair was just blowing in the wind. Uh, and why the hair was pulled over the face, I don't know. You know, and this thing was very well groomed. It looked like it had been brushed. It had no leaves or sticks or anything in the hair. And as far as skin, um, I don't remember seeing any skin except for, I guess you could count the hands, and it was black. But and that right there is what has completely turned my life upside down. Um, I have had to change the way I do things. Uh, and I still go out and get in the pool. I made myself go back out there while I was here by myself. I made myself, um, and I still go hunting, but I don't hunt alone anymore. He's always here. He's out with me. We don't sit together, but he's usually within hollering distance. Um, but just seeing one and seeing the size of it, uh, it completely blows your mind. And you know, I I've had people, say, "Well, it didn't do anything," but I believe I believe 100% that the good Lord stepped in that day. Otherwise, I don't think I would be here.
Encounter number 2.
All right, so I'm a backwoods West Virginia hillbilly, and I was born in 1975 in Man, West Virginia, in the backwoods. And we always hunted, fished, everything. And then whenever life had a thing that come up, we eventually moved to Kanawha City, West Virginia, and it was at 57th Street. Well, me being a backwoods hillbilly and enjoying hunting and fishing and everything, and I always varmint hunted, with homemade bows or the fiberglass bear bows whenever I'd pick one up at a yard sale until it'd break, and homemade arrows. I would go out rabbit and squirrel hunting, and I just enjoyed the woods and mountains. I spent a lot of time out there, a lot more time than most people. I mean, that was my life because my life at home wasn't that good. Unfortunately, my dad was an alcoholic and he was very abusive. So the more time I spent out in the woods and mountains, the better off I would be. And, me being 11, 12 years old, my parents at that time, it was normal to let your kids hang out in the woods and mountains and camp out and go fishing and hang out at night. As long as you were home for supper and you had a good excuse to go back out, you were good. Well, when I moved up off of 57th Street, in Kanawha City, behind the Kanawha Mall, which is long since gone, I noticed something different. Nobody had hunting dogs. Nobody hunted, and we're talking a hillbilly community. Nobody went out hunting. Nobody was out after dark. The kids had to be home before the streetlights came on, have dinner, and by the time streetlights come on, they had baths or showers or whatever, and they were in bed. Since I didn't have people that wanted to do it with me, I just did it on my own. And I explored those mountains, hollers, and logging roads by myself all the time. And I found abandoned houses halfway up the mountain, like my papa's house was that he had built because he was an old West Virginia coal miner. Well, I'd gone many miles back up in the mountains, and I'm up there and I'm building shelters and camps and camping out because I don't like being at home. Needless to say, my shelters and camps started getting tore up. Well, that kind of made me mad. I went up there and I thought, all right, I'm going to rebuild my shelter. I'm going to mark it as my territory. So I took a leak on several trees and I did it up as high as I could take a leak. And I even thought it was funny. And it was a huge mistake. And thinking back on it, it almost cost me my life. I peed on several trees as high as I could, 7, 8 feet high in the area. And I held back and I did quite a few trees, and I thought it was funny, and I giggled and I snickered when I did it. It was the wrong thing to do. And this is early August 1988. I know this date because it had been my birthday, and I had received a cheap survival knife. And it'd been a couple of days, and I decided I was going to go up there and go fishing with my little fishing kit in there and see if I can catch something. So I hiked back up after I'd urinated on all these trees. And what I saw was absolutely terrifying. What I saw was every tree 6 to 7 inches thick. They were snapped off like 6, 7 feet in the air. But there was no storm in those few days. I mean, there was nothing. And when I saw that, it scared the living heck out of me. And I found me a sapling and took my little survival knife and I sharpened it into a spear to give me a little more courage. I knew it wasn't going to do that much good, but I needed something besides a survival knife to make me feel better. And I walked back out of those mountains, taking my time, head on a swivel, turning around, pointing my spear in that direction. And I could remember seeing something way off in the distance peeking out at me. I didn't know what it was. I tried my best to avoid the thought of it. I was terrified. And we're talking a 2.5 hour hike out of the back mountains of West Virginia and the far end of the Kanawha National Forest, just shaking and terrified because I made something really mad. I challenged something that I couldn't ever compete with. And as I'm coming out, the thought crossed my mind to go to my friend's house, Curtis and Keith. And I went there because it was 1.5 miles closer than my house. Because, I mean, I traveled miles to get out of those mountains away from this thing. And when I would walk, it would walk. When I'd turn around, it would duck. But it was on my tail. And I got to that logging road and I felt such a sense of relief because I had this feeling of imminent danger, like you have a dog or a pack of dogs snarling and growling at you the entire time and you don't know which was going to attack first. And that's the feeling I had. And that was for a couple of hours to get down there. I climbed down that ravine and back up and sat down at the picnic table right there by it because I knew I could see anything coming across that ravine, and there was no other place to cross. It was choked with briars and vines. It was impossible to cross. Anyway, I climbed up there, and I hung out with them a little bit. They were doing yard work, and I talked to them, and I'd forgotten. Well, the sun went down, the lights came on, and my friends got in trouble again, and I was sent home. And when I was sent home, I remembered why I was there. And anyway, I went out to the road and I'm walking down the road. My head's on a swivel and I'm scared to death. I mean, I am terrified. This is some of the most fear I've been in because I remembered, what I had done. And there was an old abandoned house right down the road from them. It was an old red brick house. It's long gone, but it was falling down. And when I got to that house, I hit this smell that I'd smelled up in the mountains before. It's rotten flesh, wet dog, and it's hard to explain this smell. But once you smell it, you're going to know it. And I got that feeling again, that feeling of imminent danger. And it felt like a pack of wild dogs around me snarling. I mean, I was tiptoeing. I was scared to death. And when I got to the other end of that house, I stopped because I felt like if I went further, I was going to die, is what I felt like. I was on guard. I was swiveling with that spear and knowing it wasn't going to do any good. And then I heard a noise in the brush beside me. And I turned and looked, and I had a street light behind me. It was a full moon night. And I saw something large in those vines and bushes. And he was moving around, and first thought it was like, okay, bear, bear, bear. Okay, back away. You're fine, bear. And then it stood up. And when it stood up, that wall that it was near was 12, 15 feet away. And that wall was 8 foot high. And when it stood up, its shoulders were even with that wall. Maybe an inch or so higher. So we're talking 9.5 feet tall or more. Its shoulders were 3.5, 4 feet wide. It was massively muscled, and it was covered in hair, not fur. This is hair, like the hair on your head. It wasn't coarse fur like a deer or a bear or a hog. This was hair. You could see daylight through its hair. That's how I knew. And it was longer on the arms than it was, the rest of it. And its face was like a cross between a gorilla or a chimp and what you would think would be a Neanderthal man. It didn't have a long muzzle. It was short. The nose was more gorilla-like. It had a pronounced brow, but it was hair. And it was dark brown going to blonde at the tips. And I stood there and I looked at this thing for several seconds, and it looked at me. And I could tell it was not happy. And it let out this screaming roar that traveled through my body. And I swear I thought if I was closer, it broke every bone in my body. It was that powerful. It took my breath away. It was so strong. But it wasn't a roar. It wasn't a scream. It was a screaming roar. It was a cross between the two. And when it did that, I involuntarily lost control of most of my body. I almost collapsed, and I dropped my spear. And the only thing I could think of was to run. And I took off down this hill that you couldn't walk down fast without falling. You couldn't ride a bicycle down without sliding. I ran down this hill as fast as I could with my life on the line. I don't know how I could physically do it. But I ran. I bet you if I was racing Usain Bolt, I'd have smoked him. I ran for my life down that hill. And I heard it crash through the brush. And then I heard 2 smacks, like it tripped, and its hands, they weren't paws, they were hands, hit the pavement, and it pushed itself up on 2 feet, and it was on my tail. I ran that half a mile down that hill, and it seemed like seconds. And when I got to the corner, I turned that corner and leaned into it like I was riding a motorcycle. And when I did, I heard it slide, and it grabbed the back of my shirt and ripped the back of my shirt off. Now, the shirt I had at that time, I'd been going to a skate shop in the mall, talking to this guy. Tony Hawk was big then, and I bought a Tony Hawk Fireball skate wheel shirt. And they were like triple layer cotton. They were really tough due to road rash. And it ripped it off my back like it was nothing. I mean, those were like the thickest cotton shirts I've ever seen. And it ripped it off my back, and I felt it yank on my neck, and I just kept running. Well, I ran for the house. I ripped open the front door. I slammed it shut. And my room was 3 walls of a glassed-in porch with like a 3-foot wall around it. The rest was glass to the roof. that we had converted into my room because it was a 2-bedroom house. I had my propane heater. We hung up curtains, and I had an old wrought iron bed. And I dove under my bed, ripped my quilts under my bed, and curled up in a ball and was screaming and crying, freaking out. My dad, he was a big man. He was 6'2", 280 pounds. He ripped me off from under the bed, carried me in the living room, and threw me in a chair, slapped my face, and he said, "What's gotten into you, boy?" And I told him, "Something's chased me home. I don't know what it is." I said, "But something chased me home and almost got me." And my shirt, I took it the rest of the way off. And my mom said, "What happened to your shirt?" And I said, "It ripped my shirt off." And I stood up and I turned around, and there was fingernail marks on my back. They were widely spaced, wider than a human hand could make. They're not claw marks, they were fingernail marks. And of course, my sister's sitting there saying I was lying. "You're lying." You know, me and my sister never got along. We haven't talked in 25 years now due to the way she is. But she was always against me. And she said I was a liar. And when she saw the fingernail marks on my back, she said, "Oh my God." And my dad's like, "Tell me what happened." And I started going down that something chased me home, and it ripped my shirt off, and it chased me to the front door. So my dad, this big Korean conflict veteran, he walked over to the window, and I'd never seen my dad afraid of anything. And he pulled open the window in the living room just a little bit and looked outside for a few seconds, and I saw a shadow go by that window. And my dad turned around, white as a sheet. I mean, this thing would have been full view of the street light that was outside across the road. He was white as a sheet, and he said, "Boy, what did you bring home to us out of those mountains?" And I said, "I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I did." And he's like, "Okay, we're going to kill the lights. Everybody go to bed. Be quiet. We're not going to talk about this. This didn't happen." And we went to bed. And I know now the reason why my dad never called the police to try to protect us from this thing is because every time we'd move, he'd write a bunch of bad checks, and he'd get felonies from them, and then we'd move, and he'd hide. You know, he wasn't that good of a person. He was a dictator in that house. But when he said something, you did it. So I went back out to my glassed-in porch, unprotected, knowing that this thing could smash through the house and kill every one of us, and nobody could do anything about it. I went out there and I tried to lay down on my bed, and I guess I passed out from eventually an adrenaline rush from fear, because I remember laying in bed for a long time shaking and crying because of this. And I woke up. I don't know what time it was, but I heard something outside of the house, and I could see it moving outside of my windows. And again, 3 walls in my room were nothing but windows and curtains you could see shadows through. And I could hear it sniffing outside of my house like a bloodhound, you know, real loud. I mean, it was louder than when a deer blows. It was loud. And it was touching the windows. And I just grabbed my blankets and slithered under my bed and curled up in a ball, and eventually fell asleep again or passed out. But this went on for several weeks. And of course, nobody would talk about it, you know. And by the end of August, my dad had wrote a bunch of bad checks. We were packed them in a U-Haul, and we were moving. And normally when we would move, it'd be Ohio, West Virginia, stuff like that, Virginia. We moved all the way to Greer, South Carolina. We moved all the way to Greer, South Carolina because of this going on. But I remember going outside and seeing barefoot tracks in the wet grass for months before this incident occurred. And me being a stupid kid, I was thinking, well, maybe my dad walked outside barefoot, which he never did. You know, my dad always wore house shoes or boots, work boots. He never walked barefoot. But I saw these barefoot footprints that this thing was following me out of the mountains for months. And I thought that maybe my dad had started walking in the yard barefoot to go get his car ready for work or something. But now I realize it wasn't true. And now I realize that people in that area knew that was there, because I'd been up other hollers down through there. And those other hollers were like houses built at the bottom of a cliff. And they'd play at night. They'd run around at night. There was nothing. But when the mountains met the houses, they didn't do that in that area. And people, they weren't outside at night. They didn't have outside pets. They didn't hunt. They owned shotguns and pistols. And I'll tell you, there was an old Indian that lived on that road between myself and 57th Street. He had gray braids, and he was always sitting out on his porch smoking his pipe. And he always had a double-barrel shotgun on his porch, which at that time, we didn't own no guns. We never owned any guns except for my grandfather, my papa, and I owned a Crossman 760 Pumpmaster BB rifle. Is all we owned. My dad refused to own guns, and so we had no way to protect ourselves. But that old Indian, I was walking by there one evening, and he looked at me and goes, "Hey, boy, come here." And he never talked to nobody. I'd lived there a year and a half. He never talked to me. I never seen him talk to nobody. I walked up there, and I was like, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "You need to stay out of those mountains, boy. There's things out there you don't understand." And my papa, he never said anything about anything in the woods or anything bad. But after he moved from Man, West Virginia to Logan, he would always tell me, "You get inside before the sun comes down. You don't go outside. You stay out of the woods or the boogers will get you." I never knew what a booger was until I found out on my own. But I know the one that I saw, and when I looked out my window several days after, when I didn't think it was out there, it looked me face to face. And it ducked down. Its face was in mine. And it had humanoid teeth and canines. It had both. But I also believe that depending on the region you're in with them, they're different. If you see one, it'll change your life. But you want to make sure it's on the best circumstances. You don't want to do anything to draw them in or mess with their territory. If you see stick structures and all that, leave them alone.
Encounter number 3.
So in 2017, I was working at a lodge in McCarthy, Alaska, which is pretty remote. It's 325 miles from Anchorage. I'd worked all summer, and I was kind of beat. And a friend of mine and I decided to take my truck up to the toe of the Root Glacier, which is basically the end of the glacier. And on the way up, I got a real, like an ice cream headache between my eyes. And I told my buddy Bigfoot, just kind of jumped into my brain. And then I saw this animal. It was dark brown, and it was moving from right to left, and it went behind this slight hill. And I'd stopped by that point. And this animal, I could see, maybe from just above the ears up. I couldn't see the ears. It was just a brown head that literally floated behind this little hill and kept going. So I told my buddy, "Hey, man, let's pull up there and don't slam the door. Let's go see if we can find this thing." He's like, "Okay." So we did, and I told him, "Why don't you walk down about 60 yards and cut into the little bit of brush there?" And he went down and cut in, and when I knew he was in, I couldn't see him anymore. That's when I walked in. And I was hoping he'd flush whatever it is to me. And originally I thought, it's a bear. It has to be a bear. There's no such thing as a Bigfoot. So I walk into the just past the brush line, and there's not a lot of brush around that glacier. So you can see. And I scanned from left to right. And when I did, there wasn't anything there. And then when I went to scan left, right to left, I mean, there was this brown Sasquatch there. It's like 6'5", maybe a little over 3.5 feet wide, about 3.5 feet wide, its shoulders, and it was built like a basketball player. It never looked at me. It did glance at me. And when it did, I noticed there was like a gold or a yellow as its eye, you know. So the other thing I noticed is that iris or its pupil was just massive. I had no idea how it could see in the sunlight, and it was right in the sunlight. And then it took off super fast, jumped over some logs, took off again, and it was gone.
When you saw this creature, did you feel anything? Did you smell anything? Was there anything like that kind of out of the ordinary, obviously, other than what was happening? But did you have any of those two senses at all, fear or smell?
The only thing I felt that was abnormal was a headache, an ice cream headache. I know that's weird, but that's what happened.
That's wild, man. That's why I always, in my opinion, there's more than flesh and blood with these things. And I know you've got some other experiences that we're going to get into. You've got a lot of things that actually happened to you. And I always like to ask my guests before we get into that, how did that sighting affect the rest of your life? Coming from not believing in Bigfoot and hearing of it but not believing about it and then having an encounter with one, how did that affect you?
Well, I think for the first 6 months, I was trying to figure out what was going on. If it hadn't been for my buddy that saw it, I think I was crazy. But we both saw it, so I'm not crazy. And then I went into, well, I just kind of blew it off. I watch videos and things, but it really didn't bother me on the bush because it wasn't aggressive at all. So I wasn't worried about it.
I think that's a good way to handle it. And I think a lot of people, they bury it. They either bury it or they just, kind of blow it off or not sure what to do with it, man. And I'm glad that first encounter wasn't a bad one because, I know you spend a lot of time out in the woods and especially living in Alaska, what else are you going to do? I mean, you have to go out in the woods, but I know a lot of guys have these encounters and it just ruins that from them. It takes that from them. But I know in the email you'd sent me that you talked about being paralleled while you were hunting, and then also you had a couple of encounters with two of them, I think later on you said. So why don't you talk to our audience a little bit about that?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota and basically near Garrison, Minnesota, or Mille Lacs Lake. And there's an old hardwood forest in that area. I actually grew up on Kenny Lake. So across, the highway and down the road a bit is this hardwood area I'd hunt as a kid. And I hunted it, as much as I possibly could. So I was out there, and more than once. I mean, it was fairly regularly where I would go out there and I would have something parallel me. And back then it was like, what is that? No matter how many times I tried to run and see what it was, because it would be like right over there on the other side of the brush and I can't see it, so I'd take off and go look. There's nothing there. I could never find it. So that's that. That's pretty much that. And then in 2022, I think, is the next one we were talking about. The first thing that happened is, I have to walk. I have to walk to this physical rehab. So I'm walking down this trail, and it happened to be the same trail that I was on with the truck in the same area, which I'm wondering what's going on there. But I'm walking down this trail, and it's pretty late, but it never gets dark this time of year. And it was a little later than this, maybe, a few days later. But so the lighting is, I call it blue. It's kind of a twilight. So you can't see really clear, but you can still see fine, to walk around and stuff. You just can't see details. So I'm walking down this area where this Sasquatch I saw before 5 years earlier, or whatever it was. Uh, and this thing, well, how do I put it? I thought I felt something or I saw something that it made me stop. And I looked and looked and looked and I couldn't see what I was, what had caught my mind's attention. So I stood there and stood there and then realized there's a 12-foot Sasquatch standing behind that 12-foot spruce tree. It was huge. And it was standing so that it would appear to be a shadow. But when you have that blue dispersed light, there are no shadows. So that's what my brain picked up on. I didn't know what I was looking at first. I mean, I stood there and looked at it for quite a while. And then I put my hand up and I said, "Hey, big brother," and I turned and walked away.
Good grief, man. That sounds pretty that's pretty scary being that close with one of these creatures. And
Well, not only that, I can't run.
well, I don't know that any of us would be able to outrun one of these things, but it's probably a good thing that you didn't run. I think their instinct would probably to pace you out or chase you. But what details were you able to see with it being that close and especially lit up like that with the sky and stuff? Were you able to get any details?
There was not much detail because, when you're standing under the canopy of the trees a little bit and the diffused twilight, it's really hard to make out detail. So basically, all I saw was, the standard 12-foot Sasquatch. Its legs were, well, one leg I could see, the other was behind the tree, and about probably 40% of it, maybe 60% of it was sticking outside the tree. So I saw both arms, its chest, its head, and one leg. And it was black as black could be. And it never moved at all. I'm the one that turned and walked away. And I actually went about my own walk, my daily walk. And when I walked back through there, it was gone.
Well, you're a braver person than I am, man. I don't know that I would have had enough gumption to want to go for my walk. I think my walk would have been done for the day. But I guess being in Alaska, you really don't have a choice, especially if you love the outdoors. And I mean, you didn't have a bad encounter with it, so I can see that. I kind of have this theory that if you have an encounter with one, if you've seen one, there's another one really close by, and it makes me wonder if that one was close by when you had your first sighting, in 2017, because that wasn't very far, back.
No, it was less than, for what's weird is this state is massive, and I've been all over the place. And I see two Sasquatches a quarter mile apart.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot, man. And I think these things, they're in packs, family. I don't like to use the word family, but I think they're very, I don't know the word to use, family oriented. And I think they're in groups. They migrate that way. Maybe they watch each other. I have no idea. I know that there was a gentleman that I had on that had an encounter in New Mexico when he was a kid, and he said it was very odd because they come around the corner and this thing was on all fours in the middle of the road, and it turned around, he said, and it whistled at something back up the hill, and he thinks he was letting the others know that, hey, somebody sees me and things like that. So it's it makes you wonder why they do some of the things that they do. And but I know that you've got a lot of different things that have happened to you while you were out there, and I would love to hear more about that. I know my audience would love to hear more about that. But you talked about encountering something really, really evil in the woods, and that you actually lost time in that encounter. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that if you're up to it?
Yeah, I can tell you a lot. Basically, that was in the Air Force, and I was in Louisiana on Barksdale Air Force Base. And it was January 17th of 1991. I'm sorry. About 2 in the morning. So I pull up to this area called CAS, CAS. It's a conventional weapons storage area, not nuclear, conventional. So I pull up to the gate, and unlock it. It's one of my favorite places I checked because it was away from main base, kind of, and there was no way nobody could get in there because I had the key. So I could go out there and chill out and, walk the area and decompress a little bit. I was a cop, you know. So I go open the gate, drive my unit in, shut the gate, lock it. And it was really foggy that night, and it was a little bit misty. And as I drove, I had a truck, a Bronco, and I carried it. At the time, I was armed with a 9mm M9 and something called a GAU 5A, which is basically an M4. That's all. So I'm carrying that thing, and it's locked in the truck. So I'm going down. I have to check these bunkers. So I check these giant bunkers, and they have this big can on the front that's really a padlock. So you can really see it easy, usually with a spotlight. So I'm cruising down through this, and I'm looking at these cans. And I was looking at cans on each side of the road that day, so I could see them all. And as I got closer to the newer bunker area, which is at the back of this storage area, the fog started getting more and more thick, and things just didn't feel right. I felt like I was being watched. I was starting to get scared, which is completely not like me, especially when there's nobody out there and I'm armed at the teeth. So I keep going, and as I go in there, it's more and more terrorizing. So I finally get to the end of the old bunkers, and I got to go check the newer bunkers. And I'm telling you, I have never been that terrorized in my life, ever. Worst terror I've ever had. 56 years old, and I've been charged by bears. It ain't the same. It's totally different. So I get up to, just past this last bunker, and I'm like, something's wrong. So I took out my weapon and I charged a round into it, put one on the pipe for the rifle, and of course, I had my sidearm on. And I get up close enough so I can see these bunkers, the newer ones, and they're cut open and all the doors are unlocked. And that's totally weird. It shouldn't ever be like that. So I immediately call it in and say, hey, man, this is whatever, police 6, I'm in the Cass area, and need immediate backup. I got unscare bunkers. And there's a longer pause than usual. And they come back and they say, clear the area yourself. We don't have anybody as backup, which is completely wrong. You should never do that. That's insane. So I knew there was another project going on base. And I figured that everybody was tied up because of this project that was going on. And I cleared the bunkers, and there was nothing there. They're completely cleared out. So I knew that there weren't any enemy combatants or terrorists because they always leave junk behind. And I called it in and said the bunker's clear, uh, returning to base. And I still felt really, really creeped out and terrorized. It was like something truly wanted to terrorize me, and it was incredibly evil. It's hard to explain, but I got back in my unit, went back out to the gate, and I couldn't open the gate. It was like welded shut. And I prayed a little bit, and it wouldn't open. It didn't work. So I'm like, this entity that I could feel now was behind me, and you couldn't see it, but it was close behind me. And I remember turning around and walking over to it and saying, will you please let me go? And I walked over and slid open that gate like it was on grease, drove my truck through, walked back into the gate because I had to, locked it up. There's a passenger gate off to my right with a big key. And I go up to that thing, and now the thing feels like it's like standing with its toes to my heels. It is so close. And the key's not working on the fence, on the gate. And I turned around and I said, "Would you please let me leave again?" And he did. It did. So I popped open the gate and walked through, locked it. I went over and I emptied the round out of my GAU, put it back in the mag, put it back in the truck. And I was going to get in and leave. And I could just feel this thing radiating hate. It doesn't hate it. I mean, beyond description. And it was angry. That was no doubt. So I turned and I walked back behind my truck, kind of near the gate, near the vehicle gate. And I looked out there and I said, "Thank you. Thank you for letting me go." And it was like all the hate disappeared and it started floating way back by the newer bunkers. It was still evil. There's no doubt about that, but it started leaving. So I get in my truck and I hear somebody on the radio and I'm not sure who it was. So I look at my watch and it was 3.5 to 4 hours in there. It should take at the most, if a little foggy, maybe half an hour. So what happened? I don't know what happened. I've been asked by like Wes from Sasquatch Chronicles, "What do you think happened?" There is a hole cut out of my life. I don't know what happened. And I've talked to professionals about it, and they say, well, if you get frightened, sometimes it can, you know, make you forget times. But yeah, I was scared, but I wasn't frightened. There was nothing that stopped me from moving. It was hard to go forward. But so I get into base and I put my weapons away and I have to go debrief with the flight chief. My flight chief had went home because it'd been so long. So I debrief with the day shift flight chief. And to do that, I have to go knock on his door, tell him why I'm late, what happened, and then I get to go home, go to sleep, and do it all over again. So I knock on his door, and he says, "Enter," and I walk in, and I'm like, "Senior Morse reports is ordered." He says, without acknowledging anything, he's like, "Did you see it?" I'm like, "Did I see what?" He says, "Don't give me that crap, Airman. Did you see that thing out there at Cass?" And I told him, "No, I felt it, but I didn't see it." And he says, "I'm giving you a lawful order. Do not ever check that area alone again. If somebody tells you to do so, you call me on a landline, or if you call them on a landline and tell them you've been you have a direct order saying no."
Good grief, man. Joe, I can understand why now that you were able to continue on with your walk after having an encounter with Bigfoot, because that's nothing in comparison to what you went through, and that gave me goosebumps. And there's a lot of things in God's universe we just can't explain, but that's just pure evil. And being in law enforcement, there's been places that I've had to search where you could tell that there was something there, and it wasn't flesh and blood. And so I can relate to what you're talking about. And for you to feel that thing as close as you could on your back like that, man, that is incredible. And to have that amount of time missing, I know firsthand, like 30 minutes might go by. Like, I get it. Like, you can get 30 minutes you can lose, but you're not going to lose 3 to 4 hours. That's just not. Nobody's going to do that.
Fenced in area.
No, not a trained police officer, somebody who's used to searching these things and doing these things. And you're right. My first thought was like, man, you never go in alone. But there's situations and times that you have to do what you have to do. And man, in my opinion, you're very fortunate to be sitting here to share those encounters and to share that. What do you think that was?
I think it was flat out a demon. It had to be. It didn't have a physical body, but this thing was as evil as it can get. I mean, I'm not kidding. My back is just crawling right now thinking of it. That was a long time ago. I was 22.
I 100% agree with you, man. You absolutely had a supernatural encounter, and I think a lot of those encounters tie into Bigfoot. My opinion of what Bigfoot is a Nephilim, fallen angel. I think it's demonic, something in that realm. And I think somehow they tie together. How that is, I don't know. And I tell you something else that's really strange. That after doing this for a while, if you've had an encounter of those sorts, the odds of you having another encounter are really high for whatever reason. And I don't know why that is. I don't know what that is, but you are very fortunate. And thanks for, being brave enough for sharing that with our audience, because that's a wild story. And you also want to say thanks for your service, man. Thanks for your service. Well, you've had a lot of things happen, and I know there's a lot more that you could talk about, and I'm all ears, man. If you want to go into some of these other things that happened to you that you emailed me, I know there was a whole list of things.
I don't know if I put it down, but the weirdest one that scared me the most here in Alaska was a stump that disappeared. So it was the same year I saw that big Sasquatch. I think it was 2022. It wasn't last year. So anyway, I was walking along the same trail again, and I was looking for that Sasquatch, specifically paying attention to it, that area. And as I walked through the area, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. But when I was about to walk into the glacier area, I noticed there was a big black stump about this big, could quite put your arms around it. And a big black stump out there is impossible. And the reason is it's a receding glacier. There's no time for a big tree to grow. And that's what caught my eye. There is no way a big stump can be there. Just impossible. Totally impossible. So I stood there and I lit up a cigarette, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, how come it wasn't there yesterday and the day before and the day before that? And all of a sudden, this thing opened its eyes, and they were golden. And at first I thought it was just flowers. And I'm looking at it and looking at it, and I thought, I gotta go look. So I start walking towards it without my eyes coming off it. And my feet got a little tangled in a brush. And you know how you look down just for a second to get it clear, and then you look up again? It was gone. So I walk over to that area, and I've been hunting my whole life and tracking. There was no tracks, there was no disturbance, and there was nothing, there was no noise, there was nothing. So from the time I looked at my boots until the time I looked up, it was gone.
Good grief. Now, you said that the eyes, when you saw the eyes on this stump, that you said they were golden, correct?
Yeah, I thought they were flowers.
So your first encounter with Bigfoot, didn't you, and maybe I'm wrong, but didn't you say there was kind of a gold kind of tint to its eye when you saw the iris of its eye? I wonder if there's a correlation there somehow,
There probably is, and it may have been the same one. I don't know. It was black though. I mean, really black. That freaked me out. That was the most freaky thing I've ever seen up here. Now I've heard voices and stuff like that out there. Not in that area. Well, actually, in that area, I've heard the giggling. It sounds like kids or teenage girls, and it was an area where I just walked past. And you could pull up a satellite image or whatever, but it looks like the moon out there. There's no plants in the glacier moraine. So when you walk past an area, there's nothing to hide. I mean, yeah, there's rocks and stuff, but you'd hear them. So when I get out there and I was sitting there, and basically praying. I don't really meditate per se. I heard these giggles, and they were just over, a berm of moraine, and it was, my best guess was 60 yards away.
Wow. How long did they last?
Well, they giggling off and on for probably an hour and a half, and then they left. Well, I left actually.
That area is so strange. It makes you wonder why there's so much that is going on there. And I think you're definitely doing the right thing going out there praying, man, because that is some strange stuff. Do you go back there very often now at all? Have you been back in a while?
Much as I can, yes. It's beautiful.
Man, I know you sent me a video. Is that the video of the place?
No. That's the Sheridan Glacier. That's another kind of weird area. That's where I heard all the talking and screaming.
Okay, so So why don't you tell us about that, man? I'm so intrigued with all this stuff, man. And you've had a really incredible life and experienced a lot of stuff. So why don't you go and get into that and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what year it was. It was probably 2015 or 16. And I was out of Cordova, Alaska, which is a long ways from here. It's a 6-hour ferry ride to get there. So it's a long ways. And you got to put your truck on a ferry and then go into town. It's a small little town. Then what I do is drive 18 miles out and then head back in the woods. So it's probably 23 miles from town and a couple miles. I don't know how far from here actually. It's on the middle of nowhere, you know. And I like camping there because it's so beautiful. So where I like to go, you have to go down a Forest Service road, and there's lots of Forest Service out there. Alaska's mostly federal land. So I go out on this road and I have to cross, I have to forge two rivers that have a ridiculous amount of salmon in them at the time. Like, I might run them over. There's a lot of salmon there. So I go back out into this area and I like to camp there because it's so peaceful. And, fishing's easy. You just walk down the road a little bit, go fishing. There's nobody out there. Nobody goes out there for the most part. So I'm out there and it's kind of misting. It's a rainforest, so it's going to do that. And I was sitting in a chair and I had one of those solo stainless steel burners, going because the ground's always saturated. I like to lift it out the ground. And so I'm sitting there with that going, and I had my feet up on on a table and a headlight on, and we're reading a book. And I hear the ravens kick off. They were something scared me. And I thought, well, okay, no big deal, not yet. And then I heard a bunch of owls, and I heard two owls. And I thought, well, that makes sense because owls eat ravens, and that would wake them up at night. And then eventually, they went back and forth a little bit. And then this owl did a hoot, and it didn't sound right. They never did sound right from the owls. And it turned into like a man screaming as loud as he possibly can and then dying. I mean, it was awful. And I've never heard something like that. I mean, I've heard screams and I believe they may have been Sasquatch, but nothing like that. And I listened and the whole area went quiet. There was nothing. It was just dead quiet. And it was so dark that night. It was like, one of those moonless nights, heavy cloud cover. You can't see anything. You can't see your hand in front of your mouth, your face. So I thought, well, I wonder what that is. I didn't know what it was. And then basically they all started screaming out there. And at the time I thought there are 40 to 50 of whatever these things are yelling. And I mean, they're yelling. They're screaming and they'd scream and holler. And then there was I assumed it was a female that would holler and it could speak while it was screaming. I don't know how to explain it other than that. And they spoke in like Yupik. Yupik is a language that's spoken out west by natives in Alaska, Eskimos basically. And it was like Yupik, but it wasn't Yupik. It was just different. Uh, the thing that kind of scared me off is I assumed it was a male off to the left, and I had one off to the right. The one off to the left, I can't see, you can't see anything out there. I assumed it was bigger just because it laughed. And it was this big, deep, demonic laugh of ho, ho, ho. It did it over and over, and then the one on the right did it. So I had one on each side of me and a whole bunch of them in front of me. And I'm thinking, well, I'm laughing actually. I was chuckling because these things, for whatever reason, they entertain me. They really did. I didn't feel threatened, but once they were like, it sounded like they were partying or playing a game up on top of this hill, which I knew, in front of me because I've been out there so many times. There's a pond and then there's a, you know, slow slope to a mountain or a hill. It basically is a hill. That's where I thought most of them were, covering that side of the hill. And they were having such fun and such glee. You could hear glee and joy in their voice that I thought, I think I'm going to leave. I didn't feel uncomfortable about not being invited. I don't think they cared I was there one way or the other. I just happened to be there. But there's the story about the Copper River devil monkeys. So the devil monkeys are told by natives, elders. And what happened is some natives were right next to the Copper River, which I was about 10 miles away, not even. I was about 10 miles away at the most when I heard the yelling. So I figured that in. I'm like, natives had said that these Copper River devil monkeys, or devil monkeys in general, but these specific ones, kill people. And a group of hunters, native hunters, were looking for, they were hunting and they bumped into these things once. And they were kicking around a human head gleefully. And that popped in my head, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going.
Ooh, I think that you made the right decision, Joe. I'd have been gone a long time ago, man, and I don't even know what to do with that. That is crazy. You were very fortunate, Joe, to be here to share these encounters, man. Because to be that close to something and for it to laugh like that, I sometimes I catch some flack on this channel because I think Bigfoot's evil. I do. I think it can be evil. And I think sometimes they're like people, you run into the right one, you're okay. You run into the wrong one, you're going to have a really, really bad day. But how do you explain that? And what do you do with that, right? What are you supposed to do with that?
Well, people that don't believe in God and they don't believe there's a supernatural, I feel bad for them.
Oh, I do too.
Because humans, we are amazing things, but we can only see, according to scientists, we can only see 0.0035 of reality. So we're blind, and we're trying to figure out a puzzle that, we can see tiny, tiny bit of that, it's just not going to happen.
Encounter number 4.
When I was little, my uncle was in the military, and they were doing maneuvers out in the mountains, and he told me that he saw Bigfoot up there, and that was when I was like probably 8 years old, and it always stuck with me for years and years. And just like around 2010, I was watching Finding Bigfoot, and I saw, I don't know, a few episodes of Finding Bigfoot, and then I got online because I heard on one of the episodes something about um, his website, so I checked it out, the BFRO, and I saw they had a sighting around my area, and I thought that's really cool. I'm gonna go see if I can, something can happen for me. So I saw it was on the La Jolla Indian Reservation, and that was probably about 40 miles from where I live, and that's in San Diego County. I know it's kind of crazy, San Diego County, right? Bigfoots. Um, so I went up there, and well, come to find out, you have to pay to be in there, and I couldn't pay every time I wanted to go Bigfoot, and I wanted to go a lot. And well, the sighting was the guy was walking down a trail, and a Bigfoot came up and was crouched down on the trail that he just went down, and he felt like somebody was watching him. He turned around, and it was crouched on the pavement on the trail, and it actually left a gift for him, and then took off. And so that intrigued me a lot. And so I went back home and checked the map and just to see where would be a good place for me to go. And I've been up in that area quite a bit before, but never thought there would be a Bigfoot in that area. And so I just kind of followed the San Luis Rey River back up the mountain. And then I noticed it crossed the highway, Highway 76. And then once it crossed that, then it cuts into the woods, and it kind of shapes like a pie. So from the highway and like this, it's like that. This is the main road, and this is the service road, and there's a gate there. And then as it goes farther in, the pie gets wider. And then at the other end, where the crust would be, is another road that goes the backside of Palomar Mountain. And right beyond that is the Lake Henshaw Dam, and that's where the water comes from. Is that lake? So I got my stuff and I headed down there to. Sorry, my neighbor is doing some work over there. Um, so I got my stuff and I went down there, and I went underneath the bridge, and I set up my little structure or whatever to camp out, and I planned to be there for 3 days. I told my ride to leave, and I didn't want nobody to know I was there. So I stayed there for 3 days. I went down to the water, came back up, go down to the water many, many times with my other dog, and nothing ever happened. So I was kind of bummed out, you know. So I put my stuff at the top of the hill by the road, and I was waiting for my ride to come, and I was getting bored. So I walked across the road on the other side of the bridge, and so now the road's on my left hand side, and I could see the guardrail. I could see down the road, and nothing's coming. And I'm looking straight down to San Luis River. I'm on the other side of the bridge now, and I see a tree. It's kind of obstructing my view to see the rest of everything else. But I see the water and a little bit of the ground on the other side. And whatever was down there that obviously was watching me for the 3 days saw my legs and my dog, and it turned, I guess, to run off and hide. Well, it hit a tree and it broke the tree down. It was so loud. I thought a car flew off the bridge and hit the tree. I looked and I'm like, I didn't see a car. And so I ran across the road. And I threw my other bag down on the other side of these huge rocks they used as barriers. There's a bunch of them. So nobody drives down next to the bridge. So I hid those and I went walking. I walked for about 2.5 miles to get to this little picnic area. There's a phone there because there's no service there. And so right when I got to the phone, my ride came. And I'm like, wow. So I was really intrigued at that point. I was like, I got to come back, even though I'm scared. This is what I want to do. So I called my uncle. He doesn't know anything about me doing this stuff, and he's not a believer that I know of. We'd never talked about it. And so I told him, hey, there's a place I want to go camping, and we do camp a lot. And I found a new place we can go. He says, all right, let's do it. So on my birthday, a week later from now, is in December. So everything's darker, colder, wetter. And it was December 6th. And then we came down, the ride dropped us off. We went down where I heard the tree break. We went on that side and went down into the flood zone where if the dam opened up, busted open, it would flood that whole area. And now this area has never been maintained, so there's a lot of down, sapling trees, whatever, and then leaves and trees and leaves over decades and decades. So it'd be hard walking in certain areas. And so we found a good spot that didn't have a whole lot of poison oak. And we're right next to this wall that back in the day must have some structure there. And it made a waterfall. So it was a brick wall there. And it's very old. And so we went down there and we started breaking sticks to make a fire. And we built up all of our sticks, that we needed. And we made a A-frame tarp shelter, and it kind of sloped down, and put a stick on the middle so it divided us where we're going to sleep at. So it got pretty dark, so we set our fire up and got in our shelter, and we're just sitting there on our elbows, and we're just talking. And he tells me that he hears somebody or something talking beyond the waterfall. I mean, he has really good hearing. My hearing's not that good. So I'm like, really? And I know, by listening to all the videos and all that stuff, that how they talk, like jabber, you know. And I go, well, what's it sound like? And he described exactly like what I know, right? And I'm like, so he's not lying that he's listening to what they sound like, because he wouldn't know, you know. And so I'm like, okay, that's crazy. So they are here, which was very exciting. And so I ended up drifting off asleep. We both did, because eventually it stopped, and we just drifted off to sleep. And then around 11:30, fire went out. It was cold, and I got up and I told him, "Get up, we got to get more firewood because we've been feeding it throughout the night, you know." And so we got up and I put our headlamps on. We got all the sticks together, and we're starting to stoke the fire back up. And I'm sitting down on my knee and my foot kneeling down and facing him. His back is toward the river. My back is toward the service road up on the hill behind me. And he's all, Lewis, I hear something walking over here, and it's a big, huge rock. The rock is probably as big as this garage, and it's huge. And he heard something walking up to that, and I'm like, what is it, like a deer or what? And he's all, no, it's on 2 feet. I hear something walking. And so I started popping my mouth with my finger, and I did it like 8 times. And then you can clearly hear it walk out from behind the rock. And it took, because remember, I was telling you all the branches going down and the leaves covering it under the undergrowth. And you can hear it walk from that to the river. Took 7 steps, went through the water, freezing cold, knocked on a tree, and then you can hear it drop whatever it was they used, and then walked across the river again. And then now it's on the other side of this big old bush with a tree, and it has a huge rock there. It's on the other side of that. And I grabbed my uncle from behind. I hug him, I'm like, dude, this only happens on TV. And he looked at me like in disbelief. He's like, you're trying to set me up. That's what he's thinking. And that's typical with him, because he doesn't want to be played. You know what I mean? So he went in the tent. So I'm like, I'm not staying up alone. This is my definite Bigfoot, encounter. Like, something happened. It was like, so I flew in that freaking shelter out. I'm not staying up, because it's like right there. It's like maybe 10, 15 feet from me. And so I got in there. And so after that, the next day, I tried to walk from that rock to the water, and it took me well over 15, 16 steps, and I was trying hard to get over there. And it was stumbling and falling because of the ground is all, the undergrowth was thick, but it did it very easily to get over there. So that set me off right there. That was it. So then, now, after everything after that was come out, and something may happen, something may not happen, but I'll just talk about the things that actually happened. And they're just little pieces of here and there when I come out. So I ordered me a trail camera. I tried the trail camera many, 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 many times. They don't like it. So I don't use it much anymore. I did one time, I tricked them. So I came in there and I thought this out, and I worked at the hospital. So when they do sanitizing instruments, they have this aluminum box, which they lock down, and it has a bunch of holes in it. So they put all the bloody instruments in there, and they submerge it into sanitize it and in hot sanitation. And they were going to throw that one away. So I'm like, nah, give that to me. So I took it and I put apples in there, and I took it down where the hot zone where they go down all the time. And I tied it on a rope onto a tree. Now this video is on my channel. It's North County Bigfoot, which is a dead channel because I got hacked. And so I put it on the tree, and then I grabbed more food and I put it on this rock in front of the tree right next to it. So I put like apples and a couple other things up there to attract smaller critters, is what I was hoping for. And right in front of that was a tree, and I put my trail camera there. Now I know the Bigfoots are not going to come out and mess with the camera or the food on the rock. With that camera there, it's not going to happen unless they kill the battery or they make digital pictures on my camera again, because they make it look like a black and white checkered board, and all of a sudden they don't take pictures at night, camera. You get it home and it works perfect. And so my batteries last normally 4 months, 3 months, and they will die in 3 days, easy. And so I set it on the tree, and so I left, and I came back, got the camera, took it home, did some checking out the tree. And the tree, you can see on the bottom left, there's two little branches coming up. There's just weeds, and right inside there, you can see eye shine. Whatever was down there leaned over like this and was looking at the camera, and you can see white eyes. And then in the tree in the middle, there's like it's hard to see it, but you'll see an eyeball up there, and the eyeball down at the bottom, bottom right. Well, when you look at it, it's bottom left, and up in the top middle, you'll see an eyeball there, and I have arrows going to them. And I replayed the same footage twice because I couldn't put two arrows at the same time on the tree. So it plays it, shows one eyeball, and then I redo it and play it and watch and see the other eyeball that's up there. But when those two gone, you'll see both eyeballs disappear at the same time. So they are real. They're not like a star, or whatever it may be that somebody might come up with that it might be. But if they disappear at the same time, then obviously it's something, And then there was a fox and a possum or something like that took the apples off the rock, which was triggering my camera to take pictures. That's how I got the pictures of the eye shine in the tree, because the Bigfoots weren't going to trigger it. So I had to use the small animals to make it happen. And they kept on looking inside that tree, like, especially the fox kept on looking over there. So you can check that out. It's pretty cool.
You're definitely in a hot spot, man. There's so much activity going on there, and it's really cool that you stumbled upon that and you took the due diligence to find that area. I got a lot of questions, and there's a lot to unpack there. But one of the first questions I like to ask people on my show, man, is how did these encounters, how did that affect your life, man? How did that change you?
It opened my mind to a lot of things. Like I was always, scrutinizing or, I heard one guy talking about an encounter, and he was saying, "Oh, it has a snout." And this now I'm like, "Yeah, right." And maybe he's mistaking. It's something else. Or, I was a Bigfoot believer, but I wasn't a Dogman believer. And that snout thing, and I don't do that no more. Because I was always a Bigfoot believer, but I didn't know, like, after all these things that's been happening to me, I don't doubt anything anymore, and I keep an open mind to everything. Even after my podcast thing, especially then, like yourself, hear a lot of stuff, and then it's all amazing. It's like, and I feel sorry for the people that are not as open minded. Maybe they have that certain blockage that they just can't understand, they can't comprehend. My stepdad will never. I mean, one can slap him in the face and he'll say it's not real, even though they left a red mark.
I get it, man. I talk to a lot of people that are like that, man, and no matter what evidence you throw at them, they're not going to believe it. And I think it comes down to they just don't know what to do with it, because it's something that our whole lives it's not supposed to be there. And I am fortunate to be able to talk to a lot of people that have these experiences, and so I think people just don't know what to do with it. But why do you think they're on that piece of property? Why do you think they hang out right there?
Well, it's a perfect spot because you can see, if you do an aerial view of it, I'll give you GPS location. There's water there. They don't have to cross the main road to get to the water. There's plenty of deer, plenty of food over there. They have thick cover. The mom and the babies stay in a really thick area with a real huge pine, creepy looking tree, and her and the baby sleep up there. And I mean, it's a perfect location. Nobody really will even know. A lot of people go fishing underneath that bridge, and they nobody knows. I mean, after all that stuff that's out, I go out there and there's somebody fishing. I'm looking at them like, you don't even know. You know what I mean?
You know, it does make you wonder how many people walk around with their eyes closed and just they don't pay attention. If they knew, you know, I say all the time, people ask me, you know, what's the one thing that, you know, spending so much time in law enforcement, you learn it's like if you knew what was driving down the road next to you every day, you'd probably never leave your house, you know, let alone Bigfoot. But man, being that close to all that and not knowing it's there is pretty crazy. I got a couple questions about your first encounter. Whenever this thing took off and snapped that tree, number one, how big around was that tree? And number two, did you feel anything? Did you smell anything?
No, I didn't. I didn't. The day of, I didn't. I didn't. I thought it was a wash. I didn't feel like something was there. I didn't feel like I was being watched. I didn't even think anything was ever going to happen. I was just going to go home and go back to the internet and look up something else, try to find out another place. And the tree was about, I don't know, probably about that big. It was laying there I was like, that's a pretty big tree. I couldn't break that tree, and no way.
Yeah, that is, man. I don't think people realize how big these things are, man. And until you've seen one, I don't think they really understand how massive they are or how big they are. And you know, I think you're pretty fortunate to have all those encounters and be here to talk about it. You know, I personally don't think Bigfoot's your friend. I don't think he's friendly, and I think you mess with the wrong one, you're going to have a really, really bad day. What do you think's kept you safe to this point?
I don't know, stupidity and wisdom. I don't know. I don't know because I think just luck. I didn't feed them a whole lot. I just did it on special occasions, you know, and for leverage because the babies were very crafty. They were little brats, and and I would place food out for them and put my recorder in a spot. They would not mess with the food, but they would mess with my recorder, you know. And I did that intentionally. I brought everything. I mean, everything, everything you can think of. I spent over $200 of crap just so they would leave my recorder alone. They were obsessed with it. But I think mostly just I don't know. I think because I gave them the respect and the space they needed, and I only one time I felt dread of not going there, and it felt like I wasn't supposed to go there, and I did, and they told me how to leave.
They definitely will do that. And again, man, there's so much to unpack. Why? Number one, I got this question for you. Why do you think that they mess with electronics the way that they do? Why cameras never work? You know, all that stuff. And then secondly, tell us about that encounter, man, where you had that encounter where they made you leave. I want to hear about that.
Well, it wasn't very long, but the trail cameras, that obviously they don't want to be filmed, I guess, and they know what that thing is. And I think they have an energy which zaps, you know, devices, batteries, and stuff. Only if they kind of know what it is, because I bring a recorder and they don't zap that. They don't know what it is. There's no lights. There's nothing on it, and they are obsessed with the recorder. I got great things on recorders. I mean, I got burps. I got freaking one of them sounding like a motorcycle. You know, all this crap. And the mom talks a lot. People say that Bigfoots don't talk unless they're spoken to. Wrong. They do. They whisper a lot, like long, dragged out, airy words, which I don't understand them. But she does it a lot, and she's very fascinated by and obsessed with the recorder. Anywhere I put it, she's on it. But the time they told me to leave is when I felt dread. I shouldn't be there. I went down there. I was dropped off, which was stupid because I shouldn't have went down there feeling the way I felt. And so I went down there and I went right into the spot where they go, like right. They come down that hill, they cross the service road, go down into the flood zone, and they go to the water. That's their hot zone right there. That's their honey hole, and I put my tent right there, and bad. And so it was hot. It was like 91 degrees out there, and I'm like sweating like a dog, and I'm like looking at my watch. Okay, well it's 7 o'clock. This should be coming out pretty soon when the sun goes down. And then right when I said that, huge live branch snaps. I mean, it snaps and then splinters and like there was power behind that. And I got the hint right there. So I took off. I said, okay, all right. I know what they want. They want their space. So I told them I'm going to go down because about a mile down the road is the Lake Henshaw Resort. It's a campground and a trailer park over there. So I sat there for like I don't know how many hours, 4 hours, until I was that get enough nerve to go back. Am I doing that too early? Am I going to have arms when I leave that place? So so I went back. I'm here a little early. I'm just going to get in the tent, go to sleep, and I'll be leaving tomorrow. So they didn't bother me. They didn't slap my tent. They didn't do nothing. The baby stayed away from me. I heard the baby over by the water digging holes and then cracking rocks inside of it. So I saw that the next morning, little brats. And so I stayed in there and did my thing. And then I left the next day for sure.
That was a smart call on your part, man. I think they do a really good job about pacing people out when they don't want you there. They definitely let you know, man. That sounds like you were in a really crazy area and have seen a whole lot of stuff. And sometimes I get flack for asking this question, but I got to know what do you think these things are, man? What do you think they are?
Awesome. That's what I think they are. They're awesome. But I don't know. I don't know what they are. I just to me they're probably just like a caveman. I mean, they're strong enough to live in the dinosaur days. I don't know. I don't know what they are.
That's a very honest answer, and I think none of us can really know what they are. We can have our educated guesses, but it's very interesting to know and hear what people think, man. And that's really crazy, man. I know that you have lived a very, very interesting life, and this is kind of off topic a little bit, but when we were talking earlier, you were telling me about something that happened with you while you're out on some of your travels, with the bear. Man, if you're open to talk about that, I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Okay, so I ride my bike across country. It's a bicycle. It was a GT Aggressor mountain bike, to be exact. And I don't like pannier bags. It's too too detailed. You have to pack everything tightly, and I don't do that. I like to throw my stuff in and go. So I strapped a couple milk crates on the bike, one small one in the front, one on the back, and I hit the road. And I have a dog. I had a dog back then. He passed away since then, but we did a lot of travels together. And so we went all the way across through California, all the way up to Oregon, and I went to Klamath, thinking I was going to go see Klamath Falls, but there's no falls in Klamath. That was a rip off. But then somebody said, "Well, you got to go up toward Crater Lake and Diamond Lake up there. That's where the Klamath Falls are at." I'm like, "Well, that's messed up." So I had to go that way. So I went up to Crater Lake and I went to the backside. I couldn't make it. So I came back down, got rerouted, ended up going to the Diamond Lake Junction and ended up going 14 miles up the mountain. And once I got the top there, and then I had to go, I went to Diamond Lake Campground and just checked out the lake and got a shower and all that. Then I took off and did 9 more miles to Crater Lake. Beautiful lake. Oh, I'm so glad I did it. It was the hardest ride I've ever had. And so I turned around, came back down 9 miles down, and I got to Diamond Lake. I took a shower at one of the campgrounds, which are free in Oregon. And so I came back out and I thought, okay, it's getting late afternoon. I got to get some sleep, but I'm going to get on the road and find a place to camp somewhere. And I always disperse camp everywhere I go, even if it's in a town. I'm sleeping on a bench. I'm sleeping in the woods. I don't care where it is. I'm doing the full experience. I'm not gonna get any kind of spoiledness at all. I'm just doing it hardcore the way I want it. So I'm heading down the 138, Highway 138, going down the south side or north side of Diamond Lake. And I'm going down for a little bit. And then I come around this bend, and there's a baby bear right there, ran across the highway. I'm like, whoa, that ain't no dog. You know what I mean? You don't see those in San Diego. So I thought, okay, well, baby's gone. And then I went down and I turned right onto this logging road. It looks like they just logged it. Two deer took off into the opening out there, and there's a lot of debris out there. And so I made a U-turn and went onto the dirt road. And I saw this little area where it looked like a logger might have camped out there. Now, perfect spot, flat, and you can see the road, and you can look up the mountain right there, and it's pretty opened up because they cut all the trees down, of course. And so I pulled my dog off, and I pulled my tent down and just threw it on the ground, and I heard a snap behind me. So I turned around, and the female of that bear was charging us, flying down the mountain, things flying up behind her because it looks like she's not going fast enough already. You know what I mean? She's clawing everything, and her hair's up, her teeth are snapping. And then she heard my dog bark, and she stopped. I think she thought my black dog was her baby. So she was charging me. So my dog barked, and then right after that, I started filming, and then I filmed her by the tree, and then finally she ended up taking off because I yelled like a Bigfoot and made my dog howl, and the bear's tail tucked in and took off.
Good grief, man, Lewis, you're very fortunate to survive that. I think your dog probably saved your life, man. That is crazy. I mean, that is wild. Bears scare me, man. They really do, and I know that wasn't related to Bigfoot, but I wanted our audience to hear that because, man, you've experienced a lot of stuff, and you've seen a lot of things in the woods, and been fortunate enough to live a pretty cool life, man. I know there was probably one more encounter that you want to talk about. So if you want to share that, I know our audience would love to hear it.
Yeah, this one's a cool one. I got it on video too. If you guys want to check it out. A lot of people say, "Well, I want to see that on video." It's all there, everybody. So what happened? I put my recorder out on the. I went out there one time just to throw the recorder out. So I put the recorder out. There's a little levee next to the service road, and on the inside of the gate, the service gate, I go in there and I move a couple leaves back, and I put my recorder in there, wrapped up in a plastic bag, and I leave it there for a week. I come back, I take it home, I listen to it. Now I work at the hospital, so while I'm working, I put my earphones on and I listen to all the footage that I had done for the week. So I put them in there and I just run it. And whenever I hear something, I stop, I put the timestamp on there and what folder it came out of. And then when I get home, I'll dissect everything and put it into certain folders. And so that Bigfoot, that baby one, would run up and down the levee. You can hear going up and down and come up and do tapping noises on the ground with a stick and scrape, 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 and tap, 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 and scrape, scrape, scrape. And then all of a sudden you hear leaves moving. So, and then the leaves moving stopped, and then it started again. So when I came back to get the recorder, what happened was the recorder wasn't where I marked it to be at. It wasn't there. And then I got a stick and I was going through the leaves. I found it 5 feet away from my area where I had it. The baby one found it and re-hit it from me. I was still rolled up in plastic bags. And I'm like, what the heck? That's pretty crafty. That's why I call them little brats, because they are little brats, both of them. And so when I went back again, I went around on the bridge and I looked down and I noticed that the mom, when the baby was running up and down, I guess she laid down on the vegetation and left her body outline. And I got that on video. And So I videotaped that, and I was only one by myself. I couldn't do a size recreation because I zoom in and out and all that. So later, I came back with my sister. Now this was the grass is different now. It's I think it was greener when I went back. So what happened was um, when I did this size recreation, the weeds that are thick on the side, on the left side of that body outline, are green when I go back. So where it curves and goes up behind me, where the weeds grow and comes over like the shoulder. So that's where the Bigfoot shoulder was. I only went up to the hip bone of the creature on the body outline. So when when I was laying there and my sister was on the bridge, I felt uneasy. And so I was like, okay. So I got up, I had my camera in my hand. So I got up and I took 3 pictures. I went home, got on the internet and checked out my pictures, and I found the male was watching me. And you can clearly see him. He's in where he's standing out inside the bushes next to the tree, and he's leaning over this rock, and his head is out, but he's looking to the side, to his left, looking at me, but he's not facing at me. And where he is bending over at, where his hips are at, comes up to here to me, standing up inside there, and that's where his hip was at, where he's bending over inside that tree. Because I went back in there to check it, and his head is about as big as a 5-gallon bucket for sure, big and gray. He has black solid eyes. Um, it's kind of hard to see anything right here because you can see his mouth open, but I can't. There's some bushes and stuff in the way, and it's causing blurriness. So so it was hard to see that part. But he had black hair going back and stuff like that. Do you want me to talk about that invisible creatures or no?
No, man, we can go for a little bit longer. I'm sure my audience won't complain, man. They get on to me all the time because some of these aren't long enough. But yeah, let's do it, man. Tell us the story.
Well, I hope you all like this stuff. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about it. I feel honored, you know. But so I went out there on my last day, and I was going to travel like he was saying, travel around on my bicycle. So I wanted to go back and say thank you to them and for not killing me and letting me hang out with their kids and stuff and allowing them to torture me. And so I brought some food, and I felt like I was supposed to bring something for them, like a certain something. So it was hot fudge in a jar, and so and it was seemed like that's what they wanted. I don't know why, but I brought it, and I was doing the video. I have a short video, it's a minute and almost 2 minute long, and then I have a unedited version where you can see the whole part of the video, just so you can see the backstory and why I was filming up there. So I put my camera up and I positioned it toward the mom and the babies where they sleep at, and I kept on telling the camera, you know, keep an eye up there for movement because that's where the babies would come down and make a left or a right on the camera, and you could see them make a right, and then you would see them going by. So I'm showing this stuff, and I didn't know what was up there. I didn't see it when I was there, and I kept pointing up there. And these 2 little invisible things. There's one is like 3.5 feet tall, and the other one's 4. You can see. The only reason why I saw it at first because of the light, and so I'm sitting there, but you got to watch it on a big TV. You got to be in a darker room so you can see the blurry. Because when I hold up like that and I go down and I go, that's one, and then when I do that, he turns around. The one on the left turns around and faces the tree, which I'm thinking that's what he does because his eyes disappear. So I know he's facing the tree, and the other one's eyes are still there. And so when I go down to get the next item out of the bag, the one on the left gets paranoid and takes off. So when he takes off, he turns into a ball of light. The one on the next to him looks at him. So you'll see 2 lights running at the same time. But once that other one light disappears and he goes around the tree, the other one that's still there will turn and face the camera, and you'll see two white eyes looking right at me. So that was pretty trippy to me because it was a different feeling that I felt than any other time that I've been there for the 12 years, and it was definitely different. And I say it in that other unedited version. I say I feel something's here, and it wasn't the same as the Bigfoot, you know.
That's pretty wild, Lewis. And when you start going down this rabbit hole and you research this stuff and you hear these encounters, I always walk away with more questions than answers. And I think we could sit here all night and talk back and forth and try to figure this thing out. I had a guest come on my show from North Carolina, and he had a really similar experience. He saw these eyes, and long story short, these eyes turned into orbs that hovered above his tent. His dad was with him. His dad saw faces in these orbs. They called on the name of Jesus and they left. But he said that the atmosphere was not, it was not good. It was a very not good experience. And it really shook him, and it just makes you wonder, man, these things, who knows what to do with that? What do you do with that kind of stuff, man? And that is really, really wild. And guys, I've not seen any of his videos, but we will make sure to drop a link down below so you guys can go watch them. And man, I what do you think those were? Like, what do you think? What do you do with that? What do you think that was, Liz?
Well, I have a picture of it. I don't know if anybody knows Ken King. Yeah, he's a Bigfoot researcher too, out of Arkansas. He sent me a picture, and it looks like an owl's head, has the circles also around the eyes, but they're white, and the bottom part looks like a penguin, but it has hands, and they're only like 3.5 foot, 5 foot tall. And they said that's some of the shorter ones, but they hang out in Bigfoot areas, and they live down and in the tree root areas and underneath the trees, or inside like tree cavities and stuff. And that's what they say. But yeah, there's another guy in another country that he does this stuff, and these little creatures come out, and that's what they look like. I mean, that's the size of what I'm seeing, because I went back and I kind of put the camera up and I measured the tree and all that stuff, and I kind of get an idea of the sizes. That's why I'm saying those sizes.
Encounter number 5.
Here's how the story began. About 5 years ago, I was doing a podcast. I was doing inspirational videos on my podcast on the mountain. One of my followers had told me that they had seen a pyramid in the background. So in the last 5 years, man, I went searching for those pyramids because back then I was going through a lot. So I've been through so many trails. I couldn't really remember where I shot that footage, but I found the pyramid. And then amidst that, I was speaking to, I've met a lot of people on this mountain. I've been on this mountain for about 5 years religiously. And I've talked to people who have been on the mountain for over 60 years. And there was this, an Hohokam elder who claims to be one of the last of the Hohokam still alive, like the bloodline of the Hohokam. And he had told me about the ruins, he told me a history about South Mountain. So I went up there looking for pyramids, and I found these ruins. So I started working on these ruins, and at the time of the day, it must have been about noon. So the sun was just beating on me. So I had to literally go around to the other side of the mountain for some shade to take breaks. And during one of those breaks, man, I always looked at this one big giant rock and wondered, it looked like a house, like a structure. I always wondered, like, why is it there? Like, it just doesn't fit into the landscape. So that was the best place to have shade. I sat there, long story short, I was having a little snack, and I heard what I believed to be was a door open. And as soon as I looked up, it closed. And if you see the video, you'll see the rock that I'm actually talking about with the actual door indentions. And it looks like a door. I did the video. I took pictures of the door. I incorporated them in my video when I released it. And I just went viral. Everybody went crazy. I was compared to being the next Andrew Dawson. Only thing is, I'm still alive. But like Andrew Dawson, I was arrested. I've been followed. Every time I hit the mountain, I have rangers following me. It's crazy. Almost every video I've done on the mountain, they have literally went back and destroyed the spots that I videotaped. Like I just did I was up in a canyon and I went into a cave, found a skinwalker, chased us out, all that. They literally went back the next weekend and closed the freaking cave, dude. And I got a video of that. So yeah, the door just went crazy, went viral. A bunch of TikTok conspiracy theorists, like well known, like viral theorists, were doing stories on me, and that's how it all happened, man. And that's still an investigation. Uh, I was pressed so much by the rangers that I was told if I ever went back to that portion of the mountain, it is blocked off. There is a fence, and I've been caught so many times up there that with my pliers, they can really press charges on me this time. And I believe that the only reason why they have let me go these couple times that I did come in contact with them is because of my military experience and my background and my past rank and classification still stands. But they're kind of getting tired of it now. They're gonna get ready to crack down on me. So I actually had to just stay away from the door. I don't do no more door videos. Plus, I was also chased off the mountain by a skinwalker, and I have that on video, and it was crazy. This was just recently, man. This was just recently. This happened about a month and a half ago. I was just so you know, all my followers, I'm known as the South Mountain guy. For the last 5 years, I have been unlocking the secrets of South Mountain, unlocking the conspiracies of the Hohokam people living on South Mountain during the time of 300 BC and during 19. It was in 1933 that President Roosevelt came to South Mountain, declared it a national park, and literally blew up all the ruins of the Hohokam. And in the last 5 years, I have stumbled upon them ruins, and I have been exposing them. But I also been finding entryways into the mountain. My story is built around the conspiracy that South Mountain is a fake mountain. South Mountain was once a mining mountain, and now the government has taken over. They have built facilities inside the mountain. I have personally been inside that facility the first time that I was so-called arrested. So, yeah, I've just been exposing the mountain, and I found a cave. I found a cave, and my followers. Every time I do something, I always drag it. You know, I always make it dramatic, and I always next video, part one, part two. But this one, I didn't have no time. Like as soon as I went in the cave, we saw the monster or the shadow. To me, I saw a shadow. My cameraman saw a monster. If you look at the video, it's kind of like a reenactment of what we both saw. We went and looked at a million videos. There was no way, none of our cameras were actually working until we got out of the cave. So for some reason, the minute we went into the cave, the minute we saw the creature, the cameras were just acting weird. We were running. From gathering all the video that we did have left, I was able to capture the shadow figure. I call it a skinwalker, and I'll tell you why. But I was able to capture a little part of it as it chased me to the road. This thing shot out. It was just like shot out of the cave, dude. Like I don't know how to say it, dude. All I know is it was on us. As fast as we were running, there were three of us. It was on us, but for some reason, it stayed in the shadows. It stayed on the rocks. It stayed in the bushes, and the reason why I call it a skinwalker is because when we got to my part of the Hobart Trail, an exposed part of the trail, because I'm always off trail. So the minute we got to an exposed part of the trail, it stopped and it said my name. Now, none of my followers in all the 10 years that I've professionally been a influencer and content creator, none of my followers know my name. Nobody knows my real name. Nobody knows, let alone my nickname from childbirth. So as soon as we hit that trail, I heard my mother's voice, and it said, Guy. And I just stopped because my mother's in California, and we're not talking. My mother and I haven't spoken in almost 3 years. But then it stopped, and it got aggressive again, and was shaking bushes and coming like towards us, so we just like kept running. But when I saw the road, I popped out, and I saw that my camera went back on. You know how when you turn your phone on, it gives that that sound, that chime of I have cricket, so the cricket chime. I heard the cricket chime, so I hit my camera and I pointed into the corner, and as I was able to catch the figure, and he was hiding in a bush, but you could see it going from side to side. You could see it breathe, and mind you, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian, but Jesus is my personal savior. I consider myself a more apostolic religious man. But at that point, I said, in the name of Jesus. I don't know why. You could hear me in the video clearly say, I'm watching you. And then you could tell where I freeze up and I say, in the name of Jesus. As I said that, we jumped on the road. But you could see, as soon as I say, in the name of Jesus, the camera gets all like it just fades and it turns off. All our cameras went off. So we were on the road and we just started running till we saw people.
Wow. I will start off and say that, man, there is absolutely power in that name. I hear so many encounters where people call on that name and these things disappear, they leave.
Through all my research, like I said, I've delved into the giants and the old troll and all that, and I've always known through all my research that giants, trolls, demons, they're afraid of the name of Jesus. So my cameraman kept saying it, in the name of Jesus, and so I eventually just said it in the video. But the crazy part is when I said it, both our cameras just drained, and it was crazy because I knew for a fact I carried two cameras, and one of my cameras died, but the other, my phone was like fully charged, dude, and it would just turn my phone off like that, like it would just turn it off. And the fact that it said my name, like in my mother's voice, that's like that is something through my research that has been known. What skinwalkers are known to do, they're known to take voices of people sometimes even the shape or forms of people to get you. And being the fact that I'm in Arizona, we're a Navajo Nation, skinwalkers are not a very light topic in this town.
No, a lot of people won't talk about them. I've never had anybody on my show that was willing to. So man, that's a really strange subject to me. And I don't know what you do with that. Were you able to get any kind of description? What did this thing look like? I know you said shadow, but was there any kind of description?
Yeah. Okay. This is really gonna make you crazy, because if you check out the video and I explain the story, if you go through the comments and listen to my comments, every time this shadow would hit a rock or a big enough surface to take a form, it took a different form almost every surface we saw. Like, we only had so many times to look back, but every time I looked back, it was usually on a rock, on a big enough surface where I could see a shape it was taking. And it just took so many different shapes, but never a form of a person or an animal. It was just a black figure. But the most common shape was like a cloak. It was always cloaking, dude. No matter what shape it turned into, when it moved, it almost moved like in a cloak form, a black cloak. It was definitely a shadow figure. I did not see any kind of body parts or any kind of physical body form. It was all black. It was all shadow, and it was very aggressive. And the only time I ever heard it make a noise or speak was when it took the form of, I guess, my mother's voice, and it said my name, Guy, which nobody calls me. Nobody calls me Guy except my brother, my sister, my mom, and my wife. That's how sacred that name is. Like, that was my baby name. And she was like, Guy. And I stopped, and she said, Guy, it's me, mijo. And that's when my cameraman said, dude, that's the devil, go. And I just ran faster. I mean, I have goosebumps. I got goosebumps on my arms, like just telling, just because that freaked me out.
I wasn't there, and I've got goosebumps all over me, man. That is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. And these things are they're pure demonic, man. And I understand why people don't want to talk about them, because I've heard stories about these things following you home and all kinds of weird stuff. But there's so much to unpack there, man. I don't even know where to start. But
my whole life has been this way. Since I was a baby, I see my mom get slapped by the devil. I've seen the devil twice. One time, my mother and I both seen the devil. I tried to make arrangements to sell my soul with the devil until he appeared, and then I scared me so much that like all these weird things have happened to me. I've seen ghosts on a bus. I've taken bus rides from Northern California to Southern California and have had like evil ghost experiences. Like I just nothing surprises me at this point in my life. But at this point in my life, I retired at 50. I retired for almost 5 years ago. So for 5 years, I have been aggressively living out my childhood dreams, which is investigating and exposing government conspiracies and the paranormal and the supernatural. Even though I know that the government is watching me, even though I know they took me in a room and showed me pages, they have that stack that big of pages of all my. They're just screenshot printed of everything I've ever put out since I started this whole social media thing. Since I started releasing secrets about the government, about Bigfoot, about the Department of Forestry, knowing a lot more than and being a lot bigger organization than just a forestry organization, which I was a part of for a good 5 years. I was a Holotac. I was on Holotac crew. I was a hot shot for the Department of California Forestry Department, and that's how the whole Bigfoot thing came.
You know, I mean, nothing about the government surprises me at all. I mean, nothing would surprise me. You know, I spent a long time in law enforcement, saw a lot of crazy things. So, you know, you got to be careful. There's a lot of weird stuff out there. And of course, you know that better than me. I mean, you've experienced way more than I ever will. But talking about experiences, and I know we could do a whole podcast of what you just dropped, and maybe we will, and that would be great. But I'm really curious to hear this Bigfoot story, man. Like these bodies that you saw, man. I am ready to hear that. And I know our audience is too. So, man, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
When I was working for the Cali Department of Forestry, I was actually in the military, but I was like an inactive reserve. I was doing recruiter. I was a Navy recruiter, but I was a voluntary firefighter for the California Department of Forestry at the Butte Fire Center in Paradise, California, which the government just burned down. But that's a whole different story. I was stationed there, and we had a big fire back in the late 80s. It was the Wyoming fire. It took place at Yellowstone National Park. And this fire was so big that every fire agency in the United States had deployed. I'm telling you, every volunteer firefighter from California to New York, Canada was there. Um, the government called on the military. We had every branch of the military voluntary to fight this fire. It was so huge. It was like one of the biggest fires in wildland history. So I was on a hotshot crew, and by the time we got there, a lot of the bulk had been taken care of. It was pretty much under control. But what we had deployed to, we deployed to a flare up. A flare up is when the fire circles around an area and it connects to the point where it just explodes. It's like a bomb, dude. It's like a nuclear bomb, and everything within that range is gone. And I don't know, mad love and respect to the hotshot crew out here in Arizona. This is the anniversary of their death when they died out there in a flare up. They died in a flare up, man. They just deployed their fire shelters too late. It just was a messy subject. That's not what we're here to talk about. But I had just deployed to a flare up. So when we get to the flare up, we do what we call a hot mop. A lot of us are just turning over charred, burned embers. You know, we're putting everything out. A lot of us got these, we call squirt bottles, but they're basically tanks that are on your back. They just squirt water. A lot of us have some that we carry and pump and squirt water. We're basically just cleaning up all the burnt and charred mess. In that situation, it's very common to run into animals, burnt animals, dude, like bears, deer, so many animals that we have to account for. We have to get it all together, you know, and get so that the Department of Agriculture could get a account of all the whole, you know, the land loss of the fire. And in that process, one of my buddies, I was on crew 2, mind you, we were crew 2, California Department of Forestry, Butte Fire Center. One of my buddies who was on the mop, which is, believe it or not, it's actually like a mop. It's a big giant mop, and we wet it. and it has like this powder in it. I don't know. It's like this retardant. It's like a fire retardant, and it's just to soak up all the hot spots. And he found what we first thought was a bear clan. It was crazy, dude. It was crazy. He called. We all ran over there, and what we saw, it looked like 5 bodies, 5 big bodies. Like even the little ones were big. So I mean, in all our experience as firefighters, wildlife firefighters, the common thing would be those are bears. We ran into a bear clan, but a lot of the firefighters were new, and I being an oldie, I was one of the veterans, and just something didn't sit right with me in my belly because I've seen a million dead bear clans, live and dead, throughout all my experience in the forest, and I've never seen a bear clan bigger than 4. The mother, the father, and they usually have 2 babies. When bears turn adolescent, I don't know, they were all, I don't know, I guess when they come to preteen status, they usually leave the clan, dude. You know, they usually go on their own, especially the males. But these were 6, dude. They were like 2 big adults. If I had to explain them, they were 2 big adults, 2 little ones, and I want to say, I keep calling it a preteen, a middle, but they were all in a line. It was crazy. They were all lined up in the fetal position, and they were obviously dead. The fact that they were in the fetal position kind of made us think, well, maybe they are bears. Maybe 2 clans came together. They didn't know what to do, but the way they were lined up just didn't make sense to any of us. So as we were picking and prodding, I don't know how, dude. I don't know how, but the military showed up. Dude. The military literally showed up. It was like a chopper with a couple captains, and my fire captain went, my C1 and my C2 went to go talk to them. They did some pointing or whatever. Long story short, they wanted us out of there. They wanted us out of there like, you guys get away from the bodies. They had us stand like 50 feet away from the bodies as more military vehicles showed up. So we're thinking, the first thing I was thinking was like, this was in the 80s, so we're thinking like, I was thinking mad cow, some type of disease, some type of virus. Maybe it's like a mad bear. There's something wrong with the animals. That's what we were all thinking. Oh my God, we were exposed. There's something wrong with the animals. It's got to be a virus. The government knew about it. That's why they're here. And as the government pile built up, one of those, I keep calling them generals because I don't understand how the army was there so quick, you know. We had military on the fire because we were all volunteer, you know, military, but everybody had a job to do. Nobody was there to find Bigfoot or a virus. It was funny how they were just ready for that situation. Like, I'm telling you, it wasn't even 15 minutes that they had already took over the whole place. This big Jeep pulls up. This general gets out, screaming at our captain why we were still there. A helicopter literally flew in and took us out of there. So now we're at base camp. We're all talking. What do you think it was? What do you think it was? We're all sitting at the table about to eat some chow, and we've all decided that it was some type of virus, some type of deadly animal virus, and we were exposed. I don't know, maybe a half hour passed by, and I'm right about to dig into my steak, and I look up, and I see my captain, dude. My C1 walks into the barracks. It's a big tent where they serve food, and if you've ever been on a fire line, the best place to be is on the chow line, you know, because that's the best place to get a fat steak. Anyways, long story short, he came and sat down with us, and we had a debriefing. He told us that what we saw was a clan of bears. That's our story. We were going to stick to it, no matter who asked us, if it was military, the president, alien, if God came down himself. Our story was we ran into a clan of bears. That's it. That's all we know. So we were cool. So we were getting ready to get our next orders. We were thinking they're going to put us back on the line because of what we did. Maybe we did something wrong. We weren't exposed to anything, so we were cool. We figured we were going to go back on the line because that's what you do. You work 40 hours, you get off for 4, and you go back on for another 40, dude. I mean, that's how it works on a fire until it's out. So we're getting ready to go back. Next thing I know, our C2 and C1 call us into the barracks, headquarters barracks, which is where the head honcho that's running the whole show, that's his tent. We were all called into there and told to pack. We had 15 minutes to pack and get on the chopper and get out of there. We thought they were taking us to another part of the fire. They actually took us to the airport in Wyoming, and they flew us home that day. I mean, not even 24 hours, and they flew us home, bro. They flew us home. The next, we had the weekend. We partied that weekend. I'm telling you, we partied hard that weekend. But Monday morning, our captains show up. They go into our barracks, and that's something your captain never does. The only time your captain ever enters the barracks, I mean the personal living quarters, is if somebody screwed up or if somebody passed away, if there's bad news. But they both came in, dude. They sat us all down, and my captain said, what I'm about to tell you guys, what I'm about to tell you can never be repeated. And anybody who repeats this could be in serious trouble. And I'm talking about members of every family dying. Then they busted out with these government contracts, and we had to sign these letters of confidentiality. The story I'm going to tell you, bro, is a story I'll never forget. Because when my captain told us the story, I'll never forget the look in his eyes, man. He looked like he had just seen the devil. And he was about to tell us that the devil is real. So he sits us all down and he says, look, man, the only reason why I'm telling you this is because I have to tell you guys what you've seen so that we can all sleep at night. And he looked like he was scared. He told us that after we left, a big military convoy van pulled up and 2 Bigfoot got out. And those 2 Bigfoot walked up to the high seniority military, I call them generals, and they spoke. The Bigfoot and the military were speaking, bro. They were communicating. What he said was that the Bigfoot made an agreement with the government that they were allowed to always reclaim their dead. So he says these 2 Bigfoot walked all the way to where the dead bodies were, to where there was a little bit of forest left. They made these whole crazy screechy sounds. Like he said, a sound he'll never forget, but one of the most scariest Bigfoot sounds you could ever hear. And 8 Bigfoot came out of the wilderness, bro. They picked up the bodies and they took them away. And he told us, whenever you're in a backcountry is something us firefighters like to do when we have time on our hands. I don't know if you know what a backcountry is, but what we do is we usually take a pack with for 30 days, and we go out and we live on a mountain where there's no trails, and we stay out there for 30 days. He told us, next time you're on a back trail, if you see a place fenced off, or you see those big electric towers where the mountains are, those are the places where they keep the Bigfoots. They have their own sanctuaries. He told us that they were allowed to retrieve their dead. He swore never to say anything again. And then we don't know if he retired. I don't want to say his name. It got me in trouble the last time. But we never saw him again. I personally, professionally never saw him again. As we all left the fire station, because we all got older, we all moved on with our lives. I don't know if you know, but about a good 10 years ago almost, Paradise, California was burnt down. And witnesses say that a blue laser the whole time was shooting out the sky. They could see it at night. I don't want to say no names. I could say 3 letters, DEW. But my fire station that held all the files and records of everything I just told you was burned down to the ground. So there are no records to anything or anybody that's on my story. The funny thing is one girl from that crew, she found me in the comments to substantiate my story. But yeah, dude, that was my first experience with Bigfoot. That's why I always tell my followers I've never in my whole life seen a Bigfoot alive, but I have seen Bigfoot dead. I've seen 6 dead Bigfoots, 2 adults. We all called it the preteen, and 2 babies, and they were dead as doornails, and they smelled like cooked meat. Their hair was it was the foulest smell you'll ever smell. It's like, I'm from South Central LA in Long Beach, so I know what a dead body smells like after a few weeks. It smells worse than that. Just picture that smell burnt. It's one of the horrible smells you can smell, and I get really emotional when I tell that story. Number one, because it was true. Number two, because I know a lot of guys on that fire crew are not alive to tell that story today. But if they were, I think they would be still as scared as I am today. And every time I tell that story, the female that was on our fire crew that substantiated my story, that came out of the dark and said I was on that crew, this guy is not lying. To this day, she won't tell the story. She'll never say a word because she actually believes that the contracts we signed are valid to this day. And the reason why I tell my stories is because 8 years ago, they found a tumor in my brain. The doctor gave me 7 years to live, and I'm still here. So the way I look at it is I have nothing to lose, but the world needs to know my interpretation of the truth according to my research, my experiences, and according to the truth. And the truth is, my story is if the government is watching you, they've been watching you since you were a child.
Encounter number 6.
Okay, I was a MIF firefighter, and MIF firefighter is a Montana Indian firefighter, and I was out with Hayes and Lodgepole. I'm a Blackfeet firefighter, and a MIF firefighter is a well-trained firefighter that's qualified to go out on the fires. Well, anyway, I went out with Lodgepole and Hayes, and during our time out, we were put on spike, and we were on spike for like 5 days, and we were like hungry and tired of being out in the wilderness and wanted to eat something and get a good night's sleep. Well, anyway, we got to go back to camp after 5 days, and they gave us enough time to turn in and eat something before we went and took a shower and turned in. Well, on my way back from the showers, there was a tame deer, and I was an EMT and paramedic, and the one basically making sure all my crew made it back into camp. So I was the last one back from the showers, and I was walking back, and there's a place up here in Waterton Park, National Park in Banff, Canada. You can go and pet the deer and feed them. Well, anyway, I run into a deer like that, and I was on my way back from the showers, and it really kind of like amazed me and this impressed me because I seen life. All I had seen up to that point was death and burnt trees and the smell of smoke, and I was sick of it. And anyway, next thing I looked up and I seen this thing walking upright, and it was getting down on the ground like this, getting up and sniffing around and looking around, and get down on all fours and get back up, and it would, like how housing like for forestry housing, because they were our security in that camp, and I was surrounded by about 2,900 other firefighters that we eventually did wake up. But that come later on. Well, anyway, I watched this Bigfoot. I didn't know what I was looking at first. I had no idea. And keep in mind, I'm a skeptic, a doubter. I don't believe they're real at the time. I totally don't. Well, anyway, I watched this thing like make its way past these houses, in those lights outside that light up your house outside, and then it would walk to the next one, and it would walk up by those poles, and that's what really amazed me. That thing was, I've never seen nothing so big. From a distance, I could tell it was huge. And I didn't know what I'm looking at the time. I'm just like, I could just see something moving out there in the darkness and under those lights. And it came past the ranger station. There was a gate it had to walk through, and it came right into our camp. And you could see where our HR and our first aid and our where we eat, where they feed us, and where we wash up. And there were some restrooms farther back. And anyway, this creature got by the gate. When it came through the gate, what I witnessed at that time, and keep in mind, I'm hollering at my crew to wake up, get up, and look, see what I'm looking at. I'm telling them, hey guys, I don't know what this is. What is this? Well, anyway, Bigfoot came through the gate, right? He's Bigfoot at first. What I'm looking at is something standing upright, and it's about 12 feet tall, and it's broad. And I mean, when I put my arms out like this, add on about that much more on each side, and he's solid muscle, and he's walking towards me. Then he gets down on the ground, and what he does with his fingers and his toes, and his head is looking up right at me. I had my headlamp like a spotlight, and I was keeping it on his eyes, and his eyes were red, and they were huge and big, farther apart than any human. And they were huge, coming at me. They were looking right at me. Keep in mind, everything I'm telling you, he's looking right at me with my spotlight on him. Okay, he's crawling. I don't know how he done it with his fingers and his toes, but he realized you could see him, and he was crawling on his toes and fingers straight at me, towards me, looking at me with his head up. And I don't know how he did it with his fingers and his toes, but he was crawling towards me, straight at me. Then he stops and pauses. And he gets up on all fours, and he does like this, a fist, sort of, but it changed into a paw of a wolf. And don't ask me how they did it. You know, like those movies, Werewolf of London, and they have sound effects? There was no sound effects. They just did it. And he changed into the biggest wolf I ever seen. He still had those red eyes, because I had my headlamp on him. He's walking towards me. I'm still hollering at my crew, hey guys, get up, check this out. And I didn't want to get too loud, because I didn't want to scare it away. I'm trying to balance everything here and get them up and not scare the Bigfoot away. Well, anyway, I knew it wasn't a wolf because it had no tail. And it was Bigfoot at first. And I seen it change into that. Okay? And it's walking towards me. Then it stops about halfway. And it pauses again. And then it throws its fists out like from a wolf paw to just an open hand paw like that. And it, honest to God, it turned into the biggest grizzly claws I ever saw. A hump came up on its back. The ears went down and were shorter and rounder, and the snout went back, and a hump came up on its back. And it turned into the biggest grizzly bear I ever friggin' seen. And it had claws and everything. Just like a grizzly. And it's walking towards me, Josh. It's walking towards me. Next thing it did, it stood up. It pushed off its left leg and stood up right in front of me and turned back into Bigfoot. And this was in Elk Creek National Park, Idaho, out by Boise, Idaho. It's still there, and I know if we ever was to go there, that Bigfoot, that same one, would come back to me.
Those are some wild encounters, and I am so grateful that people are brave enough to come forward and send those to me. I am very fortunate to sit in this chair and hear some of these, and I hope you guys are really enjoying these encounters. It takes a lot of guts for people to come forward and share these. And speaking of that, if you've got an encounter you would like to send me, I'd love to hear it. You can send it to me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. It's a strange world, guys. There's a lot going on that we don't get, and the only thing I could do with this, and I say it in almost every episode, but there's just a lot in God's universe we don't understand, and maybe we never will. A lot of times when I hear these encounters, I'm hearing them for the first time, like you, when I interview somebody, and I just try to learn as much as I can, and it helps me with my encounters that I've had to know that I'm not the only one that's seeing stuff like this. But guys, you need to keep your head on a swivel. It's important when you're going out in the woods. Make sure that you're not going alone. You're letting people know where you're at, and all those good things. But guys, I appreciate all the support. If you're finding value in this channel, please make sure to like and share this channel with your friends, and subscribe if you're not. But stay prayed up, guys. It's the most important thing you can do. We'll see you in the next episode.